So today I'm going to go ahead and take out all the coolant out of my car. We're just going to replace it with water. Welcome back to the garage, guys. So here's what we're going to do. Our little project here, because it's a couple days before our track day. We got the hood up. The rear is lifted because we're going to drain all of the coolant out of the engine. Why would we do something like that? Well, there's two reasons as to why we would replace our coolant with distilled water, and also we're going to add water wetter. So what's going to happen here is first benefit is the supposedly running water wetter. It will run you possibly 20 degrees cooler. So that's a cool perk. Now I do understand, basic understanding, maybe someone might be able to correct me if I'm wrong, but distilled water, which is what's the water I'm going to be using, not tap water, don't use tap water, but distilled water is less dense than coolant. And when it's less dense, well, it doesn't really retain the heat as much. However, it's still going to serve the same function to remove the heat away from the engine. That way the engine doesn't overheat. So that's benefit number one. Benefit number two, which is going to make a lot of people happy, is say something were to happen and the car overheats, we blow the radiator cap, we get in a wreck, drain fluid all over the place. Well, because it'll be just water, just let it evaporate, you know, because if it's coolant, coolant's going to be slick, coolant's going to be just an absolute royal pain to clean up. And then, you know, everybody's going to be unhappy because that section is slippery because there's glycol all over the ground. So, all right, so in order to drain this guy, obviously we're going to pop this cap. That way we can let air kind of get in there, and then down here, see if I can focus and find it. Let's see. It's a little valve at the bottom. So while that's draining back there, let's kind of talk about a couple things, because I want to set the record straight. So I am not a coolant expert. I am not a chemist in any way that would be able to say one thing or the other thing, but I am a nice little, you know, enthusiastic car guy, you know. So let me tell you my understanding of why, you know, you shouldn't put distilled water and water wetter in your daily vehicle, because there are reasons to why coolant is the way it is. Because one, it lubricates your water pump, several things. It ensures smooth operation of the internals that pump coolant through and through, right? Another big perk as to why to use your coolant or your antifreeze, whichever you call it in your region of the world, it's corrosion inhibitors that are also in its makeup, okay? In distilled water, you don't have those, okay? But why is it okay for us to do this right here? Well, we're not doing it for very long. We're basically a couple days away from our track day. We're gonna run it, you know, for the track event, and then we're going to drain the water, and we're going to put the coolant back in it. It's just how it's going to go, okay? Because guess what? This thing, I drive it a lot on the street. It's not a dedicated track car, therefore, this thing isn't really meant to have dedicated, you know, race car coolant. You know what I mean? So, now, when you do one of these kind of operations or maintenance or services for your car, Do not use tap water out the hose pipe, out the sink, because those have things within them like minerals, and what will end up happening is it'll end up corroding the inside of your engine. It'll start making a buildup. It's not good. Recommend not doing that. What is another one? There's another bottle because obviously I got these from Walmart. They're like $1 for one of those big gallon jugs, so it's not expensive to do this. The water wetter you can get from AutoZone for about, I think, $15. And this one bottle is good to service about a 12 to 20 quart cooling system. I know that my cooling system is roughly about 3.5, 3 3/4 gallons. So this will work. I think those are just important notes. Like, don't do this to your daily. Be a thoughtful guy and go ahead and do this before your track day, because, you know, if you if something were to happen, you overheat and spill, you know, your coolant everywhere, or whatever you're using to cool the engine, at least it's not going to be slippery mess and just a pain for the track guys to clean it up. And if it's just water, just hot water on the ground, it'll evaporate up, no big deal. I think distilled water, it's definitely got, I'm pretty sure it has a higher boiling point, which also, this is super important. You burp your coolant tank, or burp your coolant after you do this, because you don't want any type of air bubbles. And if it were to, you know, say get real hot, you don't want the air to allow that water to boil, because then that's going to start building up pressure, and it's not meant to have a ton of pressure. It's meant to contain itself, you know, don't get me wrong, but you don't want it to start boiling. We're going to see if we can get a couple rotations out of the engine, and see if we can pump a little bit more out, get some that's inside of the engine. It's going to be this water wetter. One whole bottle per cooling system of 12 to 24 quarts. You get one of these coolant burp funnels, 100% worth them. Worth the money. I got this one off Amazon, and yeah, this was 100% worth it, because I think you got to find the radiator cap that fits your radiator. Forgot. Maybe this one's it. Yeah. Okay. Comes with a bunch of adapters for other ones, but we need that one. Everything plugged up. Let's open up our first bottle of distilled water. Here's gallon number 2. Here's gallon number 3. All right, I think at this point we crank this thing up, burp it. still have some coolant left in the burp, but when we're down here looking, if you can see that, that was creeping down from 212, and so now we're down to 198, and it seems fairly stable there. So what's happening when the tip was getting up that high, what was happening was there was air inside the system, and so as that temperature raised, it's going to start pushing it outward to I guess kind of evaporate it, because it's going to where it can escape, because if it gets hot, it builds up pressure wants to kind of seep out somewhere, and no better place than the open hole in the radiator, right? And being that we have fluid in this little funnel, as air escapes, water will drop down into its place, thus burping it, and that way we'll have no more air in the system, and it'll keep it nice and cool, it won't overheat, and it's just going to be overall the bee's knees. So next steps is going to, after this is kind of goes through a nice long cycle, what we're going to do is we're going to elevate the front end up. We're going to top that off. We'll leave it to sit for a little while, and when it cools completely down, we're going to top off that little funnel again. We're going to let it raise up that temperature again, and we're going to make sure we get it all out. Then the final surefire way to make sure that there's no more air in here is we go take the Mustang for a rip around the neighborhood, and you put a load under it. You get a good couple RPM swings up and down, couple wide open throttles, and you bring it back, cool it down, pop the cap. Like I said, when it's cooled down, then you just top it off, and that should get it. All right, so the final stages of burping, right? So basically what you guys had seen was we had the car up, it was the highest point, so all the air would bleed out. We let the car shut down, cool off, and then when that was done, I was able to lower the car back down, take off the little burp funnel for the coolant, and we threw a cap, took the car out for a drive. So going out for a drive, the car responded very well. It cooled down. It didn't get overheated. There were a few times where wide open throttle, it seemed like the heat crept up to maybe 200 degrees, but I guess I'm not really worried about that, because at 200 degrees, that's not too shabby. It didn't really pass up 200, 201, where sitting in normal traffic, it probably will hover around like 196, 198, maybe. And that's kind of like a hot day, which it's not. I noticed the peak was like 196 sitting in traffic, but it did seem like wide open throttle, it was warming up. So I think that did a lot of good with moving air around, if there is any air that was trapped in the system. But probably tomorrow morning, I'm going to come back out here. I'm going to open up the cap, and very much likely what's going to end up happening is it's going to be needed to be topped off by just a little bit, because that air is probably going to get worked up to the front of that system if it hasn't already. So that kind of concludes this. Right now we successfully did a water plus water wetter swap from the normal coolant for our track day, and that way we're not planning for things to go bad, but if they do, at least we're not going to be the bad guy because we dropped coolant, which is slick and slippery. And I'm happy that you were able to follow along, watch us make the swap from coolant to distilled water. Go ahead and give it a like, comment down below your thoughts, and because I read them all. And if you're new here, why don't you think about subscribing?